Hello and welcome to the Classical Pairings Host Challenge. I'm your host, Nick Johnson. This show is brought to you by the National Bank of Indianapolis, and happy Halloween, everybody. We are here to celebrate the season with a couple episodes. We're going to be pairing some great classical music with some fun local breweries and distilleries that we think fit this very well. And today is no exception. We're going to be looking at two beers today from Scarlet Lane Brewing. They started in McCordsville. There's actually 4 locations around central Indiana. I've been hanging out tonight at the one in SoBro in South Broad Ripple at 46th and College, where I got to try several beers, have some good food, and had a really good time. And while I was there, I picked 2 beers and I came up with 2 pieces of music that I think pair with this perfectly. So this is a great opportunity to enjoy the Halloween season, get their sort of spooky themed beers, listen to some fantastic classical music that sort of also is in the theme of spookiness, if you will. So Scarlet Lane Brewing, they have been open for a few years now. They are one of the actual few female-owned breweries, not only in Indiana, but in the country. And they're doing some really fantastic and interesting beers. They focus on 3 types. They mainly do stouts, what they call Northwest-style IPAs and pales. So that means sort of in the Portland school. And then sort of more obscure beers. And so we're going to be looking at one of these. We're going to be looking at a Kölsch that's sort of in the Northwest style, and then a stout a little bit longer. And when you go into this, at least the location I was at, it sort of feels like it's Halloween all year. It's kind of the whole theme of the bar. And in fact, this Halloween weekend, they release a beer that is only available for those 3 days of the weekend. This year is called Slasher, and it's a habanero pumpkin pie ale. I have not tasted it. They wouldn't let me. I asked, but I have to go back this weekend and give it a try. But if that sounds interesting to you, a habanero pumpkin pie ale, I've never had anything like that. You could go get it at Scarlet Lane, any of their 4 locations, not just the one that I went to today. All right, well, let's go ahead and dive into our 2 pairings. We're going to start with, this is a beer named after Indiana horror legend Sammy Terry. This one is a citra-hopped Kölsch, and then, as they say, with a touch of flesh and blood is this beer. So it's a beer that has a little bit of hops, but because of the citrus sort of flavor, it's not overly hoppy. If you've watched this show before when I've been talking about beer, you probably know that despite being a white man with a beard, I don't actually like hoppy beer. That's the thing that people would assume I like, but my favorite summer beer is a Guinness. But anyway, I tend to like stouts, and I tend to like porters and that sort of thing. Or I tend to like sort of refreshing, crisp, citrusy beers that aren't too hoppy, which this one absolutely is. You can even see that this color has just a little hint of crimson to it, which is kind of fun. This is a perfectly crisp and clear beer, sort of in the spirit of the season. I was thinking it's like a brisk October morning when the sun mercifully rises for us, but there's sort of a haze of crimsonness that's clouding everything, and there's just a little bit of red in the air. And so to match this sort of spooky themed beer, I wanted to come up with something that had sort of daylight, but also spookiness to it. And so what sprung to mind is The Noon Witch by Dvořák. And so this is a tone poem. He wrote this after his famous trip to America. He went back home and then wrote several pieces, including this one, that is based on Slavic mythology. And so there's this demon character that actually appears at noon. Which was kind of new to me. I tend to know horror stories that are at night. But no, this demon witch shows up at noon. And in this, I don't want to necessarily spoil the whole story for you, but this piece of music was written 140 years ago, so I don't think I'm really spoiling it. But it's this horrifying story that Dvořák follows very closely. It's a fantastic 12-minute journey through this, where you have a daughter and her son. She basically jokingly threatens to summon the Noon Witch if he will not behave. Well, guess what might happen? The Noon Witch shows up, and Dvořák he has 12 bells that ring the show, the Noon Witch appearing, and then we have this epic musical chase between them, And then what happens? Well, you're going to have to listen to the piece and find out. I won't spoil the ending for you. But I think it pairs perfectly with this beer because it's crisp, but then there is sort of this spookiness about it with the color, especially if you look at the label here. And if you enjoy this at the Scarlet Lane Brewing with all of their beautiful artwork. This is, again, it's not too hoppy, it's clear, it's very refreshing, and I think it's actually kind of perfect for this time of year. So that's our first pairing. We're going to do one more today with a different beer, and this is one of their stouts. I made sure to try a stout. As I mentioned, it's one of my favorite types of beers, and this one, the Dorian Stout, absolutely holds up. This is actually an Espresso Stout. There we go. Has a very rich coffee, clearly flavor. There's some notes of caramel, some notes of sort of bitter dark chocolate. It's a very rich beer because of that coffee flavor. It's very sort of alert. I would say that it's even a little bit seductive. I don't know, there's something just a little bit rebellious about feeling like you're drinking coffee at night. And this beer kind of captures all of that in this sort of warm, approachable, sort of flavor, but one that's also just a little, you can tell there's some secrets maybe in this beer. And I think it hides that very well. So for this, I wanted a piece of music that I thought was rich and seductive, but also somewhat spooky, and so I chose one of my favorite compositions, actually, is the opera Salome by Richard Strauss. And written in Vienna, and this tragic story. It's not a very long opera, and specifically, I thought this paired well with the Dance of the Seven Veils, which is this dance near the end of the opera, in which the main character, Salome, she's dancing in front of King Herod, and it's this very sort of seductive dance. And when this opera came out, it was actually quite controversial because sometimes the opera singer or the dancer, well, first of all, it's controversial because do you have the singer perform it or do you have a professional dancer perform it? And it's been done many different ways. You might end this actually completely naked as the 7 layers of clothing are removed. Or you could do it sort of more metaphorical that still slowly shows stripping, but also maybe sort of a stripping of virtue and a stripping of inhibitions and that sort of thing in this seductive dance that happens right before the king. And so, well, this dance goes and she gets, it's a beautiful dance. She performs it for the court and the king says, "Name a gift and I shall give it to you." She asks for the head of John the Baptist. And what happens next? Well, you're going to have to find out. Watch the opera Salome because it is tragic and beautiful and haunting and really a rich and seductive work that I thought paired perfectly with this beer. So you know what I would actually recommend is get yourself a 4-pack of these and just watch the whole opera. And by the time you get to the Dance of the Seven Veils, you will be ready to enjoy it. And its sort of mystery and allure and its beauty and its richness. So there you have it. We have 2 beers that I think pair well with sort of spooky classical music, if you will. Dvořák's brilliant Noonwich that tells this tragic and beautiful and heartrending story in a tone poem. And then we have the Dorian Stout, which I would pair with the opera Salome, and specifically with the Dance of the Seven Veils. So, Classical Pairings is a listener-supported program, and if you like what you hear, you can text PAIR, that's P-A-I-R, to 202-858-1233, so that we can bring you future episodes pairing classical music with great local craft food and beverage makers. I would specifically like to thank Scarlet Lane Brewing for showing us a wonderful time tonight and letting us try all of their beers, and specifically choosing these 2. And so make sure to check out one of their 4 locations. I'd also like to thank our production assistant, Chloe Bolter, and our producer, Ezra Baker-Trupiano, for their great work, and of course, our friends at the National Bank of Indianapolis. So thank you, everybody, and happy Halloween. Cheers.